Okay, Senator Bushwell.
Thank you. Could I ask perhaps, could I rephrase that last question Senator Urquhart asked slightly differently? Was the science review deliberately kept at arm's length from the zoning review?
I wasn't involved in either of the reviews, but my understanding was that the two chairs of the bioregional assessment panel were also on the scientific review to make sure that the two meshed together. Therefore, they had visibility of each report.
What do you say to critics when they say that the bioregional review was designed to provide cover for a political decision to wind back protections?
At the moment, I'd rather not comment on either of the reviews because we're in that consultation process.
Okay. Was there any discomfort or concern over the fact that Professor Colin Buxton has been on public record as being a doubter of the results of marine protected areas in terms of broader protections?
I'd rather not comment on that.
It's quite important.
But Colin Buxton went and listened to people and consulted with people, and so it's the government's report, and it came back to the government with both Colin and Peter Cochrane, who was the former Director of National Parks, both signed off on the review, and it was their joint review.
Because we spent some time today discussing why marine protected areas more broadly are important for a range of protections. But I'd like to read you a quote that Colin Buxton made on an anti-marine park video called Drawing the Line, which I think was financed by the commercial fishing industry. He says, "There's something seductive and intuitively right about marine protected areas. Just the very name suggests that they are the right thing to do. But I'm much more sceptical about whether they actually function in the way which they're designed to function. The mere act of drawing a line in the ocean and saying this is a marine protected area actually doesn't confer any protection at all. And if you think about it, the only thing that we're doing in the main with marine protected areas is eliminating fishing. We're not even considering whether fishing is a major threat or not. What about global warming, introduced marine pests, pollution, sedimentation, habitat destruction, habitat modification?" So there he's clearly saying these are marine protected areas don't really offer protections for those broader range of threats and pressures as Senator Urquhart outlined on the marine environment, that they're essentially a fisheries management tool. Would you agree with that assumption?
I can't comment on, I've not seen that tape. And as
I have seen it.
He signed, well, I'm not questioning it, but signed off, he and Peter Cochrane signed off on the reports. It was their joint report. The other thing is that I know that both Colin Buxton, Peter Cochrane and Professor Bob Beaton did some interviews for, since then, it's on the marine site where they talk about the review and their thinking and what lies behind that. So I think that's more of an update of his views, having gone through these reports.
It's my personal view that marine protected areas are a fisheries management tool, but we don't tend to talk about that. We tend to talk about them as being, lockups of the ocean and marine parks and these kind of things. But that's obviously, it seems to be what Professor Buxton's suggesting as well. Do you have a view on whether they are essentially fisheries management tools?
Internationally, marine protected areas is seen as conservation tools for a variety of things, habitat, species, and that can include fish species. They're not the only thing that can protect fish species, and obviously fish management does that as well. They're one part of the tool, and they're internationally accepted as an important part of marine protection.
Okay. So just to be clear, you said earlier that the first review, which was this report of the expert scientific panel, which was followed by the bioregional advisory panel.
Oh, they came out together.
They came out together, okay.
Yep.
In terms of the boundaries that were outlined originally that have been changed under Professor Buxton's report, the bioregional advisory panel, I think you mentioned that that panel went back to the scientific panel and said, is it possible to have these fisheries activity in this area and not impact the science? And Professor Beeson presumably and others said yes, that is possible. Is that the way did I read that correctly?
The bioregional assessment panel report has quite a bit of discourse around things that were raised with the bioregional assessment panel when they were out talking to the community.
Yeah.
People came forward with ideas about how the marine reserves may be constructed in a different way. My understanding is the way the report, from my reading, the way the report is set out, you actually see where they went back to the scientific panel to check some of that information and what the views of the scientific panel was and what their conclusions were based on that information that came to them, and then their recommendations. So they're the things that I would really like people to look at through this consultation process to see whether that logic that the bioregional assessment panels have used fits with their understanding of those local areas or their understanding of the science.
Could you tell the committee, was there any in terms of the recommendations in front of us from the bioregional panel, was there any tensions or disagreements with Professor Beaton and others around what's being proposed?
I didn't see any, but then I was very much arm's length to this review, but there wasn't anything reported to me through the Secretariat, and I can't comment. I don't know. You'd have to ask the chairs.
Right, well, last question for me, Chair. Well, so would it be reasonable to say then, based on the first scientific review, which we had different suggested boundaries, Senator Urquhart's asked you about this, that the process we've got in front of us now, which ends in October, which you are taking more consultation on, essentially brings into play broader considerations than just the science, the communities' expectations, commercial fishing, perhaps rights and revenues, and you're about to make a final conglomeration of all of those in your report.
So the two reviews happened concurrently. They spoke to each other. The members met with each other. As I said, the chairs from the assessment panel were also involved in the scientific committee. So there are not two different reports in that respect with two different outcomes. If there was a previous scientific report, it might have different outcomes and recommendations, but these two sit together. They now come into the public arena for broader discussion, and yes, certainly I will be looking at comments on both of the reports.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Chair.
Okay, no further questions. I thank the Office of the Director of National Parks and Ms Barnes and